Are drinking bans a useful strategy in your GA teams, or do they lead to far more negative consequences than the potential positives? We're going to dig in today to see, first of all, what impact the alcohol will actually have on performance, but also what are some strategies you can use around potentially including a drinking ban, but also the negative effects on those on the wider team. Thoughts in general around drinking bans. Are they effective? What ways can you approach bringing them into your team? Should you bring them into the team? Are there more negatives than positives with them? And not to steal the answer of a well-known coach educator and just say that for everything you're asked, well, it depends. But in this situation, it does. I'm generally going to veer on the end of, well, no, I don't think they're a good idea, but there are situations where they can be. I'll start this by saying I've never really been the full manager of an adult team. I've always been coach, S&C, or some kind of combined S&C/coach role. I've only ever really managed underage or school teams where theoretically drinking bans shouldn't be a thing because they're underage. If we look physically at impacts of drinking, first of all, for the first example, let's be like, okay, match on Sunday, you go for 4 to 6 drinks Saturday night. Is that having an impact on your performance the next day? Yeah, of course it is. Like, in what world where you're taking sport reasonably serious are you going out for a few drinks the night before an important game? Realistically, and while we may have heard of stories years ago of, I went for 4 pints or 2 pints the night before a match to help me sleep and I went out and won man of the match in the All-Ireland final, stuff like that just doesn't happen anymore. Even at club level, unless someone is doing it really, really secretively and is able to hide it from someone, it doesn't happen. And also, it's not just the impact on your performance. I just can't see players doing that to teammates, being like the level of responsibility you're meant to have for your own performance, because of the impact that has on everyone else putting in the time and effort for training and to be ready for matches, is going for a few drinks the night before a big important game realistically fair to all them? No, it definitely isn't. The other thing then of the impact of alcohol on performance is looking at it over like the long term. So say the night before is you're acute, the long term then having a few drinks a couple of times a week or 3 or 4 times a week if you're the type that does that, or just drinking in the longer term through a block of training. What are the chronic impacts of that? It's not necessarily the direct impact of alcohol the next day, or if I go for a few drinks Sunday, will that impact my training Wednesday? Like, realistically, it probably isn't. Obviously, depending on how many you have. But it's the other things that ties in, like having a glass of wine at home, probably having ate decent food all day, trained in the morning, drank your water, whatever you do to recover and all. It's probably having no impact on training Wednesday. But if you look at like the general context or situations where alcohol is consumed, then you're more like, well, where's it likely to happen? I go out and I watch the soccer at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock on Sunday and I have 6, 7, 8 pints and I go for a kebab tray and I'm probably getting home late. I'm having a bad sleep, because while you might feel like it helps you sleep that night, the quality of sleep is way reduced. You're dragging yourself around work on Monday. You're probably not able to eat in the morning and then craving like starchy, fatty, salty, sugary foods in the evening time. So you're just consuming poor food in general. Again, really tired going to bed Monday. You might be like thinking, should I do a recovery type session? Should I be doing a gym session? But you're going in with such low energy levels Monday. It's either a terrible session or I end up just not doing it. And it's the knock-on impacts of all that over time. Plus like cumulative poor sleep, all the extra calories from alcohol, the potential impact on mood. If that's happening week on week or a couple of times a week, then alcohol is having a very negative impact on performance. And not just on performance, just on like general health as well. But on the flip side, it can be some people's means to socialise with others. And if it's like the team thing together, they go for a few after a game, and well, I wouldn't be encouraging going drinking as a bonding session. It can lead to that if it's done, like not big organisation around it, but somewhat organically, and players just get to know each other a little bit better over a few drinks. Not that you're hoping that's going to happen all the time, but it can have or can lead to somewhat better relationships between players over time and just lead to a little bit more development of closeness and those types of bonds. I don't want people coming with the argument of like, oh, the Irish rugby team, they go for a few drinks after every match and has no impact on them. It's not the same argument. They're professionals. They've way more recovery time. It's done across teams. If every team is doing it, then it's far easier to accept, and the impact on each team will largely be similar. If there's 12 teams in a championship and 10 of them go for drinks, say in GAA, and 2 decide not to give them an edge, everyone is going to start doing that, bar a couple of players on specific teams. And that's what leads to lack of consistency, lack of inconsistent messaging, and that's what leads to far more negative psychological impacts between players than trying to put in the bans and stuff. Where I'm always wary of bringing in any kind of drinking ban from the management imposing it is what happens when your best player breaks it. If you find out you've quarterfinal championship Sunday and your best player had a drink Friday or Wednesday or the previous Sunday, and you say for the 2 weeks leading up to, or the 3 weeks or the 6 weeks leading up to, there's no drinking, realistically, are you in a strong enough position to drop your best player for a game that's going to be really close and they can be all the difference between you winning and losing? If you're prepared to do that, you're going to stand over it, and you're going to be supported by the club committee, the executive, the rest of the players, the backroom team, whoever put you in place and is going to decide if you're back there next year, then by all means, let that be the hill you stand on. I'm not convinced most people will actually stand over that. It's very easy to put these rules in place when you're fairly convinced everyone will abide by them, or if you have to make an example of someone, it's someone that's maybe not that important in terms of their playing contribution to the team. But if your best player is likely to break it and you have to deal with the consequences of that, then it changes everything hugely. We also need to remember, it's an amateur sport. It's done as a pastime for the majority of people. It shouldn't have huge knock-on impacts or constraints around the rest of their life. And if going for a couple of drinks 1 or 2 times a week is what they normally do, it's their chance to socialise with people inside the team or outside the team, it's their chance just to be outside the house, helps them relax a little bit more in general, because everyone has different relationships with alcohol. It might not be the pub, it might be something at home, it might be a chance to, like, you get to meet your mother once a week and you have a glass of wine together, and that's your like ritual together. It's very hard to go against and say, well, you can't do that anymore. Where I will say it may have a potential bit of merit is around if the team as a whole, or a somewhat representative group within the team, and not just a couple of people who like to talk a lot or a couple of older players, it needs to be predominantly across the team, be representative of the majority of players in it, come and suggest as a group they will either stop or minimise drinking in general. Then it can be taken on board, or it can be, teased out to see how can this work, what's reasonable, what's not reasonable. If there are to be consequences for someone going against this, well, what are those consequences, and are they reasonable or not reasonable? I think you need to be very careful and you tease those out. If you're looking at this from the point of a manager or a coach, put out potential worst case scenarios. And if your captain comes to you and is saying, like, we want to put in a drinking ban, right, just hypothetical situation, you go for a drink. Are you prepared for me to drop you? And are the players going to back you being dropped for this game? Making sure everyone is prepared for the potential consequences of this before you do look to impose anything. And if you are going to impose anything, do it in a realistic time frame. I can remember hearing of teams back when there used to be a couple of rounds of the championship in April, and from the 1st of February the drinking ban is in. We can't do anything remotely enjoyable that is somewhat related to drink. We can't even be in the pub having a Coke Zero or a My Waddy because it will raise suspicions. Or I have a wedding coming up, I can't even go to it because while no one from the team will be there, they might think I'm drinking, so I better just not go. That's just having way too much of an impact on people's lifestyles. Be reasonable about it. In general, a drinking ban isn't a great idea, but, and I remember back to, this is 2007, I'm really feeling old now, and the management team that I was playing on suggested a drinking ban, but one of the senior players, at the time club captain and former senior county captain, said, we don't need a drinking ban, we just need to say across the group we will all do what's necessary to have our bodies right come championship games. There was no specifics there, but it's implied what you're meant to do. When it comes to making a decision around, should I go for a few pints, should I go to the chipper, should I skip these meals, should I have food ready for tomorrow, you ask yourself, will this have my body right for championship next week, tomorrow, in 3 weeks, whatever it is, and you make your decisions based around that. I think as management or as players groups, you can probably use that as a general guiding principle, put your own spin or wording around it and try and feed that into your group, as opposed to trying to impose something that realistically might be very difficult to uphold and deal with the fallout of if someone goes against it.